Hey folks, welcome to the Ramble. Last week we saw a series of events play out that have already become familiar just shy of 1 year into the presidency of Donald Trump. During a meeting with lawmakers in the Oval Office about DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals immigration policy, which Trump announced he was ending last year, after the discussion had turned to African nations, Trump complained, quote, "Why are we having all these people from shithole countries come here?" He suggested that we should bring in more people from countries like Norway instead. He also said, "Why do we need more Haitians?" and insisted that Haitians specifically be left out of any deal for immigration reform. The next day, Trump took to Twitter, of course, and denied having said any of that. He denied using the language that was reported, that language being shithole, and he denied singling out Haiti, insisting that he has a wonderful relationship with Haitians. Most of the attention given Trump's shithole remarks is focused on their repugnant racism, and that is understandable. Amazingly, there are still some Americans who continue to defend Trump against charges of racism and deny that they have ever seen any evidence that he is racist. Of course, the fact that many mainstream media outlets are still reluctant to use the word racist to describe Trump doesn't help. But for most of us, reading that Trump had implied African nations are shithole countries and insisted on cutting Haitians out of a future immigration policy only confirms what we already knew. Trump is a racist. Of course he is. He's been one all of his life, and he's never been particularly careful about hiding it either. Remember that in the 1970s, his company was sued by the federal government for housing discrimination. Remember that in 1989, he took out a full-page ad calling for the death penalty for the Central Park Five, the 5 black men who had been arrested for the sexual assault of a jogger, and then, while running for president, continued to insist that the men were guilty even after DNA evidence exonerated all of them and their convictions were vacated in 2002. Remember that in the first speech he gave as a presidential candidate, he equated Mexican immigrants with drug dealers and rapists. Remember that the centerpiece of his campaign was his promise to build a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. Remember that during the campaign he suggested that the U.S. District Court judge presiding over a case involving Trump University was ruling unfairly against Trump because the judge was of Mexican heritage. Remember that his present involvement in politics began when he became the loudest proponent of the racist conspiracy theory that Barack Obama was not born in the United States, and that as a result, the first black president of the United States was not legitimate. Remember that when hurricanes devastated the Gulf Coast, he promised that the federal government would be there to help as long as needed. But when hurricanes devastated the island of Puerto Rico, he made excuses for his administration's slow response and complained about the size of Puerto Rico's public debt. So yeah, Donald Trump is a racist. If you're just now figuring that out, congratulations for catching up. But Trump's racism isn't what I want to spend most of this video talking about. There's another aspect of Trump that is present in his shithole remarks and his response to the reporting on those remarks that I think is just as important. Yes, Trump is a racist, but he's also a gaslighter. Gaslighting is a kind of psychological abuse. The term is derived from the play Gaslight, written by Patrick Hamilton and adapted into a film in 1944, directed by George Cukor and starring Ingrid Bergman, Charles Boyer, and Joseph Cotten. In the play and film, a woman who witnessed a murder as a child grows up and unwittingly marries the murderer. When the woman uncovers evidence that her new husband committed the crime, he goes to great lengths to undermine her self-confidence, manipulating her into doubting her own memory and sanity. Gaslighters deny having done things they are accused of doing, even things for which there is solid evidence. Gaslighters try to change the subject whenever people try to talk about their offenses. Gaslighters deflect blame and accuse other people of doing the things they are accused of doing. Gaslighters attempt to discredit any and every source of information about them, insisting that they and they alone can be trusted. Gaslighters paint themselves as the victims, as the ones who have been judged unfairly or mistreated. And gaslighters lie, shamelessly and continuously. Sound like anyone we know. The day after Trump's shithole comments were first reported and confirmed by multiple people who were there in the Oval Office when he said them, Trump posted a series of tweets. He began by blaming the Democrats for the looming failure of a deal to reestablish the DACA policy, a policy which Trump himself ended, you will recall. There's your deflection and shifting of blame. Then came the first denial. The language I used in the DACA meeting was tough, but this was not the language used. This seems to be Trump denying that he said shithole. He followed that up immediately with another shot at the Democrats, insisting that the most outrageous part of the meeting wasn't anything he said, but the proposal the Democrats made. He then attempted to frame his rejection of the Democrats' proposal as him wanting to put Americans, and specifically the military, first. This echoes an earlier reference to the Democrats being willing to shut down the federal government if an acceptable deal to revive DACA isn't reached. More deflection and shifting the blame. Why are we talking about me when we should be talking about how the Democrats are trying to harm our troops and risk the safety of our country? Finally, he tweets another denial, claiming that he never said anything derogatory about Haitians, though he does admit that he said Haiti is obviously a very poor and troubled country. He says he never insisted they be left out of a deal, blames Democrats for making that up, insists he has a wonderful relationship with Haitians, and muses that he should record future meetings because there's no trust. Denying, attempting to discredit witnesses against him, insisting that the opposite of what they say is true, positioning himself as the real victim here. Trump relies on gaslighting tactics often when damning or embarrassing stories are reported about him. During the campaign, he attempted to distance himself from the birther controversy by blaming Hillary Clinton for starting the whole thing and then taking credit for having finished it himself, whatever that's supposed to mean. After the Access Hollywood tape was released, on which Trump was recorded bragging about the ease with which he is able to sexually assault women, Trump denied ever having actually done such a thing. More recently, it's been reported that privately Trump now denies that that was even him on the tape. After multiple women came forward with specific allegations that he had sexually assaulted or harassed them, Trump again denied all the charges and sought to discredit the women, claiming that they were simply lying for personal gain and perhaps had even been paid by the Clinton campaign or his enemies in the media. Following Trump's dismissal of FBI Director James Comey, Trump tweeted that Comey should hope that their meetings had not been recorded. Shortly thereafter, it was reported that, during a meeting a few months prior, Trump had attempted to convince Comey to drop investigations targeting Trump's national security advisor Michael Flynn. Comey later confirmed this during testimony before a congressional committee. When Trump issued a series of executive orders declaring that travelers from several majority Muslim countries be barred from entering the United States, he insisted his intention wasn't to ban Muslims, even though during his campaign he had explicitly called for Muslims to be banned from entering the country. And I could go on. The point is, this is how Trump responds to criticism, to challenges, to testimony that paints him in a bad light. He denies, he deflects, he makes empty, easily debunked boasts to the contrary of whatever he's being charged with, and he complains about the lack of deference, respect, and trust being shown him. He uses gaslighting tactics offensively as well as defensively. Just last week, he tweeted about Walmart's announcement that it was paying $1,000 bonuses to its employees, claiming credit for himself in the recently passed tax reform bill. Trump's daughter and advisor Ivanka Trump also tweeted that because of the Republican tax bill, Walmart was raising wages and expanding paid family leave, and American workers and their families were winning. Unmentioned by either Donald or Ivanka Trump was the fact that Walmart was paying $1,000 bonuses only to a relatively small number of long-serving employees, or that the total amount spent on bonuses represents only about 2% of the value of the new tax cuts to the company, or that the touted wage increases were fairly modest, as the company was raising its minimum hourly wage by $1. Also unmentioned was the fact that, in addition to the relatively modest bonuses and wage increases, Walmart was closing nearly 70 stores and laying off thousands of employees. Some of those closings were so abrupt that employees were not even notified. They showed up to work and found that their stores were closed, the doors locked, their jobs presumably gone. Job growth in general has been slowing here in the United States for some time, but Trump continues to boast of a jobs boom thanks to his leadership. He is one of the least liked presidents in history, yet he and his surrogates continue to insist that he was swept into office by an unprecedented wave of popular support. He insisted his electoral college victory was a landslide of historic proportions, when in actuality it was one of the narrower electoral college victories in history, and of course he lost the popular vote by nearly 3 million votes. He insisted the crowd at his inauguration was the largest ever, when it was clearly significantly smaller than the crowds gathered to see the inaugurations of all of his recent predecessors. He denies his own racism, even to the point of insisting he is the least racist person you'll ever meet, while continuing to say and do blatantly racist things and send out dog whistles to the white supremacists among his base of supporters on a regular basis. Hey, the day after he said his shithole remarks, he signed a proclamation recognizing today is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. How racist could he be? He lies. He lies about little things. He lies about big things. When others point out his lies, he turns and calls them liars. He lies while telling us he is the only one telling the truth. And if you think this sounds like what dictators do, you're right. It's also what abusers do. And what is a dictator but someone who has trapped an entire nation in an abusive relationship with them? Trump is not quite a dictator, though only because he lacks the power. But he is a gaslighter. He is an abuser. Remember that. And when people defend him and make excuses for him, remember what it is they are defending and seeking to excuse. This is racism. This is gaslighting. This is abuse.